Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Today y Mañana. I'm Alex. This is Michael. We're very excited to have you joining us this morning on a chilly morning here in Charlottesville, Virginia, but still a great morning to just meet some new and amazing entrepreneurs in our community, talk a little finance, talk a little Charlottesville, talk a little UVA basketball, maybe.
And listen, any morning where you wake up and your health is good and everything's going fine that's
a great morning, right? Exactly. It's a great morning. So get into your cozy spot, grab your trifecta leche, and settle in. And we're going to be doing some Today y Mañana this morning. How you doing, Michael?
I'm doing good, Alex. Yeah. How about you?
I am doing well. Just a quick shout out. Love being here on the I Love CVille Network set. Of course, we love being presented by Emergent Financial Services and powered by our friends at Castle Hill Cider, by the Jim CVille, by Craddock Serious Insurance, by Forward Adelante, the Latino networking group here in Charlottesville, Virginia. Speaking of Castle Hill, we had a nice trip up there this weekend because on Sunday, right? On Sunday was the Wassail Festival that they have up there. So for those who know, it's very old English festival where you would go out with your cider and making a little noise and kind of bless the trees. This way you have a good apple orchard,
exactly,
on harvest later in the year. So Castle Hill, of course, loves doing that. So it was
so we were able to go. It was beautiful weather. Don, who's the head cider maker there at Castle Hill, he donned his I like to call it Christmas carol.
It's basically his Christmas carol, those
old English
top hats felt.
And then they had Silo, I think was the name of the band, playing a little bit of old English music, and everyone we went outside and we did a trail up to the orchards. Some dancing, others just kind of making noise.
You have to ward away the bad spirits with your little noise box,
which is interesting because that's actually something that we do on New Year's. As
Italian, make the noise.
Yeah, it's Italian culture. We on New Year's we make a lot of noise to kind of
scare away
those evil spirits. And I thought that was fascinating that the English had that same tradition.
Same tradition, yeah, it's true. Yeah. And it was just, of course, they had great cider. We got to taste the
Orchard Select.
The Orchard Select, which they make in collaboration. Love the collaborations. They do a collaboration with Monticello with their apples, and so they have a fantastic Orchard Select cider, and then some hand pies, some old English hand pies.
No, that cider was interesting because you and I both noticed that very powerful and strong apple flavor when you first tasted it, and it kind of almost tricks the tongue because at first you're thinking you're about to drink apple juice. Yeah, right? Your tongue was ready almost for to get
the sweetness,
but
then you get the tartness.
Exactly, you get a dry because it's not
a dry cider.
Yeah, dry cider.
No, so it was and it's always fun. We sang the Here We Come Wassailing song, and there was a king and queen of wassail, so just a great time.
And then they draped all the blessings people wrote on top of the tree. And then they pulled
the wassail bowl cider in onto the roots to encourage the tree to produce more apples for the coming year. So definitely always love going out there, and it's a great
beautiful spot,
opportunity. So, and I know they have more events coming up, which we can talk about a little later in the show. But
and do you remember what we're supposed to say? Wassail?
Oh, and it's drink hail. There we go.
There you go.
Which is wassail and then drink to your health. So we drink to everyone's health of our audience this year in Today y Mañana. So it was a great time. And there's some more upcoming events that we'll talk about later in the show. So be tuned for that you can go check out at Castle Hill coming up. Right. So that was fantastic. Looking forward to today's show.
Oh yeah!
I say we jump right into it.
Let's go.
All right. So we're going to welcome to the show this morning Christina Monfalcone. She is one of the CPAs. She is CPA at Monfalcone and Garris PC. Christina, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you. Hello. Thank you for inviting me over.
Great to have you on. So for those who don't know you, aren't familiar with you, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you became interested in becoming a CPA.
I'm not sure anyone sets out to be that on purpose. Sometimes, although I know our profession really needs people to be interested in that, so it is a good profession. I started out in chemical engineering, so a little different, slightly different. And so it was interested in kind of the patterns and just solving problems. And engineering, I decided that really wasn't probably going to sit in a research lab and that kind of thing. So I decided I would just go with my other love of numbers and problem solving, and started taking accounting and business administration, some marketing classes, and graduated with an accounting degree. Took a little while, took a couple tries to get a CPA exam, because that was back in the days of the dinosaur, when you took it for 2 days and had a little teeny tiny calculator. You did have a calculator, like a basic calculator. We didn't have to do it by hand. Some of the other people before me had to do it with no calculator. But it's a rigorous test, and that is definitely changing now. Now it's you take it one set at a time, and they're actually changing it every few years to make it a little bit more user friendly. There's a lot of data there that you don't really need on a daily basis if you work in a tax firm or do audits. You don't need all the things they have on that test, but you have to know them to pass it. There's a level of entry there, so it makes it a little tougher. I took I probably got that back in 2001. So this is my 25th year in like public accounting and that process. It's been a windy road. So definitely winding. Yeah, an unplanned journey. And about probably, I will say, I know we'll talk about entrepreneurship later, but probably the first 15 years were totally unplanned. And then the last 10 have probably been more planned. And the last 5, I want to be extremely more planned, because I realized that the first 15 could have been more useful. Could have been more.
Definitely going to cover. Yeah. I mean, you have the benefit of not just being a CPA that works, of course, with entrepreneurs, small business owners, but you are an entrepreneur, small business owner yourself. So you've seen sort of both sides. Of that coin. Yeah,
there's a lot of hats.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I have a question. So what is the difference between a CPA and other people who like say that they can do your taxes?
So I will say this is a definite misconception. I think a lot of people that come to our practice, they ask that they want a CPA to do their taxes because they've heard that that's the best choice. And even though I'm a CPA and I have some CPAs work for me, I have a lady that's an MBA that's my tax manager. You don't have to have a CPA to do tax returns. You do have to have a CPA to sign financial statements and be responsible for certain things, but you don't have to have that license to do a tax return. That's more about skill level and experience. And I think people have that misconception that you have to have a CPA do your return, or it's just not going to be good enough. So because I do have some great preparers that I've worked with now and over the years, and I have a great team that they may not have a CPA license, but they can do a return better than a lot of people that I know. And so I think it boils down to the person that you're working with and the experience that they have. Yeah.
So what are some of the scenarios where someone really needs to have a CPA?
Well, I think a CPA license and that experience does lend itself to just in general having the credibility is really the big thing. A lot of people use that license, and they know that you've obviously had to go through a rigorous test. You've had to go through this learning experience, and there's a good chance you have the credentials and experience to back up what you need. So a lot of times you'll find a lot of CPAs in the audit world, as well as just consulting and advisory as well. I mean, we'll say we would actually do some tax returns for CPAs, so they don't do their own. So that's why there's that little disconnect there.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's CPAs can do a lot of different things. You'll find them in most not in the tax world. You'll actually find them in industry and upper management, and especially in the audit world, they're more prevalent.
That makes a lot of sense.
What's the most common mistake you see people make when filing for their taxes? Because for us, we often have a lot of things where, like, at the last minute, like right before people we get calls like, "Oh, we need to make our Roth contribution."
Oh yeah.
Oh yes. April 15th. Hey, can I come in with some cash and put an IRA contribution? It doesn't exactly work that way.
No. I will say that is a big one, because there are some situations where clients don't plan. Maybe they don't get their tax returns to us in time for us to know if they're eligible. Eligibility is a big problem. And so then that pushes up against your all's world. And that is kind of it is a difficult position to be in for our position as well as yours, because even those kinds of things, even though they're electronic, they do take a few days to actually the transaction to happen. So you need some time, we need some time. But I will say, it's funny, like one of the weirder misconceptions that happened a few years ago when there was some tax law change is the standard deduction versus itemized. And I can't tell you, it seems like a pretty straightforward topic, like standard deduction is a personal deduction, but I can't tell you the number of times this comes up in conversation that small business people think that there's a standard deduction for small businesses, and they're limited by that, and that standard versus itemized relate to a small business deduction or a rental when it has nothing to do with each other. So I'm not sure how that message got portrayed, but it happens quite regularly, and so that's kind of unusual.
Which is important, because as a small business, you should be documenting all your expenses so that you can deduct them.
And frankly, a lot of clients, the timing is important. We stress for our clients that because we do try to provide an educational kind of background, not just, we really, really prefer our clients to want to interact with us more than just at tax time, because that's where they get their benefit for having a firm with more than maybe one person there, and maybe not necessarily the kind of the chain kind of stores, because we're there all the time and we have different resources. But timing is very important. So if you wait till March, April to get your tax return done and worked on, even looked at, you've missed any opportunity for planning beforehand, for retirement plans, for IRA, even just the thought process of it, timing on charitable contributions and giving, and in any kind of planning. Basically, there's a large portion on the personal side that is gone after December 31st. For the business side, there's still a lot open, but again, you need time. You can't go to your accountant in March and April and say, I want you to complete my books, I want you to complete my taxes, and by the way, I need you to plan if I can do a retirement plan, and how do we go about saving more money. It's not too late, it's just not so fun for anyone.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I mean, we see it all the time, because especially things like simple IRAs and so forth. I mean, that's a December 31st decision for many people. It needs to be done. So if you don't talk to your accountant until January, that one, I mean, there's other options. It's not like you're destitute of options, but a nice one has been taken off the table if you wait until past December 31st.
Exactly. Yeah, so timing is critical, and communication with the person that you're working with is very critical.
Absolutely. A couple audience comments. Johnny Ornelas, Samir del Programa, he says, hi, Christina from Guadalajara, Corp.
Yeah. Yes, we love them. Yes.
Thanks for watching the show this morning, Johnny. Xavier, watching the show this morning, he has a question. He asks, any advice on what's the best accounting software for small businesses? What have you seen in your experience that really helps people a lot?
Yeah, so on a very basic level, I will say we have a lot of clients, like real small startup clients, that maybe they can't afford software, or they can't afford really the help with software. It's not software is overly expensive. It's the how do you get started? How do you use it properly without wrecking the train just right off up front? So frankly, a lot of heirs actually use Excel, and they learn to use pivot table, make a pivot table out of an Excel file. So that's kind of on the lower side. I do recommend, though, if you're a business and you're starting up, and I tell you to look like 5 years out. Like, you don't want to plan for, just for tomorrow, like for next week, like, I can survive if I use this Excel spreadsheet. It'll probably be fine, totally fine for like 6 months, a year. And then after that, you'll struggle. But especially if you're a restaurant and things that have more kind of moving parts, you really do need some kind of other software. So most of our clients use QuickBooks, whether it's online or desktop. Obviously, online is becoming more popular, but frankly, they're more expensive. And just recently, all QuickBooks software went up, like, I want to say 30% or something. It was a pretty drastic increase. We do have some clients using FreshBooks and Wave and Xero, XERO. XERO is the competitor to QuickBooks. It's the closest competitor. The others are a little bit lower level, and they don't have as many features, but they're user-friendly. They're pretty user-friendly, and they're a little cheaper. But those are all online. So if you want desktop, QuickBooks is really one of your only options, and frankly, I think they're pushing everyone to go online, so I don't know how long you'll have that choice. They're getting more restrictive on desktop. But think about where you're going to be in 5 years and how uncomfortable a spreadsheet will be. And so that's why, we do provide training for people that can't afford our services, because we're full service. So we do have bookkeeping and payroll and advisory along with tax preparation. So, and even for people that want to do their own bookkeeping, we offer check-in services to make sure you're kind of on track, so that we don't get to February and March and realize there's a big problem. And because nobody has time to clean up a whole year's worth of books for a lot of clients at one time. So and also it doesn't do you any good if you don't know what your bottom line is. You can't plan for your tax. Again, it goes back to planning. It goes back to being prepared. Nobody wants to come to our office in March and hear that you owe $20,000 on your tax return because you didn't know what your book said.
Yep.
Nobody wins, and it becomes a real negative experience very fast.
Absolutely. No, that makes a lot of sense. That educational piece of saying,
yeah.
Do you need to also, and I think the more you understand, I think about accounting and even just doing your own QuickBooks, which does, we use QuickBooks ourselves. Yeah. The more you understand about how your business works, like you actually learn about your own business.
Yeah.
By having familiarity with those books instead of just passing them on to someone.
Yes, and so a lot of our small, real startup clients, or even ones that have been involved a year or two, they'll come to us and have us either set their QuickBooks up just from scratch because they just want to make sure it starts out properly, and then we'll train them have a couple sessions on how to do basics, like write checks, reconciliations, things like that. Others want to turn it over completely, and they say, I don't have time to deal with this. You just deal with everything. We'll pay some bills online, and you'll bring everything together and make it look good at the end and tell us what it means. For those people that want to do their own, and again, they are starting out. They don't sometimes know. They've never used the software.
Oh, absolutely.
They don't have the accounting background to even know how to record transactions. So you end up with a lot of personal accounts on QuickBooks that really are not supposed to be there. You end up with a lot of draws that are classified as salaries, those sorts of things that don't end well when you just pull those reports off, put them in a TurboTax, for instance, and don't know what they mean. Those things don't usually go well. They don't have a good result at the end. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Elena Mangione says, hi all. Hi, Christina. Hello, Elena. Thanks for watching us this morning and giving us a shout out there. So out of curiosity, because so much of our audience, they're entrepreneurs. They love to learn about that part. As a small business owner yourself, and, as well as an accountant, which, you've got your busy seasons and so forth. Yeah. How do you combat, some common challenges such as time management and things that other entrepreneurs face?
Oh, that's a good question. And I can honestly say that I have not beaten that yet. And I'm not sure if anybody's out there that has beaten it, please let me know.
Maybe more mitigation than victory.
There are small victories, but and every day it's a learning experience. But I do try to use Outlook a lot. We use Outlook in our firm, so I'm trying to use Task and Outlook to kind of keep myself on track. Obviously, I carry a notebook. I have a notebook with me, because as adults we don't remember everything we hear. Obviously, kids don't either, because I have 3 kids, and I know they don't hear everything that we say. So as adults, though, it's too easy, too many distractions. So I try to write as much down as I can. During tax season, especially, I do actually try to work at home 1 day a week, sometimes 2, just because I have my own work. I do a lot of review, consulting, planning for clients. I don't do a lot of the data entry part, so I have one side of the part to do, plus also the management of the firm. So a lot of times I'm during the day helping my staff with their issues and questions and staff and client questions, run the firm, and then so I'm working in the afternoon and on these other days to do the actual work. So I'm trying to block some things and try to make that a little easier. I can say it never 100% works. It never ends the way you think it's going to end. You just have to figure out how to roll with it.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. But that's a smart idea. In other words, sort of letting the space, changing space to make sure that you block out the time you need to do those things.
Yes,
need to get done.
You have to, on one hand, I know this is probably one of those things that I learned early on is that, let's say you're really busy and you need to get some things done. You don't always have to get them done right now. So I think a lot of people freeze up and they're like, I'm just not going to deal with anything. I'm not going to deal with anything right now. because I can't get it done right now, or I can't answer this person's question right now. So they just completely let it go. And I think it's good to get back to the point of, okay, sometimes the expectations are that you don't have to answer it right now. You don't have to do it right now. Find out the time frame. Ask questions. Find out, like, what does this really do? When is this, the expectation is that this answer needs to happen? And then set some boundaries, set some expectations, and schedule it. Maybe you can do it 2 days from now or 3 days, and it's just the same. So I think that's also part of it. There's a freezing process that happens sometimes when there's too much going on. And also there's, well, how do you schedule like a week out, 2 weeks out? Always be looking ahead, not just for tomorrow, to try to figure out how to spread your work out to be more manageable is another thing. But frankly, flexibility is probably the biggest feature, and change. Most people are scared, very scared of change. And frankly, everybody's scared it to an extent because it's hard. It's very hard. But there are some days I have to tell my staff, like, okay, if I'm just like going, chasing that shiny squirrel, you may need to pull me back a little bit, because I just become so like nonchalant about change that it's totally normal. And it's like, I'm totally fine if we want to do this a different way, this way or this way tomorrow. It's not a problem, because I've had so much change happen. It's not as a big deal. Whereas other people, like the slightest thing, like a different routing sheet tomorrow might mess their whole world up. And I just think nothing of it. And so I think that's unfortunately a downside to an entrepreneur, is that you don't realize like what it does to other people.
Interesting. How interesting.
Yeah.
That's a great point. And all right, another audience question for you. The audience is really coming up today. Neil Williamson, thanks for watching the show this morning from the Free Enterprise Forum. Neil Williamson. He asked, biggest accounting oversight or mistake that startups will often make, or things to avoid as a brand new startup that might set you off on the wrong track.
Well, okay, so actually, because we have a lot of these come up every day. Actually, I was talking to one yesterday. There are a couple of key areas. Frankly, one of them is their structure. Like, are they in the right structure? They hear a lot of advice from friends, and I'm like, these friends must be like PhDs or something. There's all friends must be PhDs in something special. And I don't mean anything disrespect, but it's like every one of them has a story about what a friend told them. And so all their friends and other professionals will tell you that an S corp is the best answer. It's the end all be all to tax savings in some sense, and it's not. Shockingly, it's not. It sounds good, but it's not, because there's some drastic downsides, and it all depends on what your goals are. If you're going to max your retirement out, if you're going to make a certain dollar amount in that organization, an S corp might just cost you more. That accountant that you're going to, frankly, is trying to get extra fun. That's their goal. They have to support themselves. They have to support their staff. And a lot of people will set up an S corporation for the wrong reasons. They won't ask the right questions. Like, how I always start my questions with, what is your net income now? What do you expect it to be in 2 to 5 years? And then we'll talk about the rest of these things. Because until you know that, you can't answer what kind of entity they need to be, what kind of books they need to have, the general structure, and how important is that. So those are probably the biggest things: looking at the structure, looking at how are you keeping your records. And most people, I swear, because again, things are fast and loose when you're, when it's a startup, survival is number one for like the first year at least.
Absolutely.
And you're lucky that if you sleep or eat or definitely you're not recording anything in any kind of bookkeeping system, it's probably your purse or your car or a picture somewhere if you're electronic. So it's mostly, most of those people forget what they spend. Because even they come to us even a month after they started, 6 months after they started, when it kicks in that, I need to do something different. I should have thought about this before. And by that point, think about how many transactions you've done, how many income pieces you have, how many little receipts that you've probably lost, how many things that you bought off eBay for your business. There's a whole host of things that people just forget about. And And all those things are usually lost because they don't think about them until it's too late.
Oh, that's a big one, and it's true because the wrong structure can just set you off from the wrong foot from the beginning. You can be paying for that years down the road, and it's funny to mention the 5 years. I know they've done a lot of studies that a lot of small businesses, if you make it past 5 years, that's when actually most of the success occurs. So it's kind of making sure, all right, can I be set up for success when I hit that 5-year mark?
There are some marks along the way. Like you make it past that first year. That's great. You make it. And then there's, the 5-year mark. But there's also gross revenue marks along the way that tend to be, like the 100,000, 500,000, a million, 1.5. There are these like barriers, and they're hard to get past because the exponential growth that you have to do within the organization, it's hard to really get past. And frankly, I'm stuck at one right now. And so you find yourself stuck along the way, and then you have to decide, am I going to pull back or push forward? And that's a whole different question.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Another question from Xavier that's interesting, just because it's been in the news and some people I know will often ask us about it. Secure Act 2.0, has that brought a lot of changes, or should people expect a lot of changes out of that?
No, I think it will definitely create some changes. It creates some opportunities because it extends some dates as to when you have to take RMDs, and there's definitely some details. I have read through the original versions. There's a lot to take in. It definitely will change projections, and it will, frankly, though, I've not had any clients ask about it yet. So I'm curious to see how long it takes, because usually there's always some that say something about it, and I think it's because it happens so close to the end of the year, and everybody realized, well, none of these things were going to happen now. It wasn't like some of the other issues that had been passed in recent years where you needed to understand right then whether you needed to make a decision before the end of the year. And so I think that's the difference in this one, which may make our tax season a little easier, but it's definitely going to have to come into play when we decide, well, what does this mean for next year? Because when we're working on the 22 tax return, we're always looking at 23 for the projection and for the estimates that people need, and for that planning purpose. So we will need to at least consider like some of those aspects, and at least, especially on the business side of things, have discussions with them for some of the more intricate parts of it related to the business piece. But I think it will change things drastically for certain pieces of the population. I think it's on really small parts of the population, frankly. The goal was very good, though. People do need to save more. It's not happening, and like the general workforce right now, because of the attitude that you go one place to another every year or two, and that's kind of the norm. It's very frustrating, frankly, as an employer. And it's very frustrating to see it on a resume of somebody that you're trying to hire, knowing that they have a track record that they're going to probably leave you in a year or two. But by doing that, you're hurting, 30, 40 years from now, you won't have any retirement. You can't stay at a place for a year or two and have and be eligible for a retirement plan. So those people that constantly job hop, no matter what level you're at, you're not going to have that retirement base because you need the years in order to build that up. And so I think we're going to have a distinct lack of people that are eligible for retirement in 20 to 40 years, and I don't know how that's going to look like.
Yeah, no, we know that.
That's a whole problem.
We see those results firsthand. Yeah. Why we really encourage people to be thinking about it earlier, because we always joke like we could be the world's greatest geniuses in terms of getting stock market returns, and we still are not better than time. Time is a more powerful factor than the world's greatest financial advisor, because time is going to be key to really building up that growth in your retirement.
And frankly, as an entrepreneur and a small business owner, let's just say up until the point when you decide to open your own business, like if you've not been saving, you don't have that freedom to do what you want. Because then you're forced to, how am I going to fund this venture? Am I going to have to go beg and borrow, go to the bank? Am I going to have the money to do this? And is it going to have the cash behind it if something goes wrong? And most of the people that are unfortunately having a small business issue, they're not the ones that are saving either. Because they've been in, they've not really found the thing that they want to do. So they do tend to be the ones that kind of jump around. And so they don't have that stability going into the business. And so then they're stuck with, well, how am I going to fund it and how am I going to make it successful and having those cash problems? So, I mean, on one hand, I was a little lucky. I just went straight on through. I just barely, I've been doing the same thing. So I had that stability when I wanted to do what I wanted to do. I didn't have to ask, where am I going to get the money from?
Yep.
I could just do what I wanted to do. And so that's been, at least for me, that was an easy part of the decision. Yeah.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, thinking ahead is just a huge part of the picture, I think, and it just from reaching out to your town ahead of time to making sure you don't wait till after the new year to do that, to really thinking before you sit down and do a startup. Say, okay, I need to talk to someone about what's the right way to structure this, and make sure I'm getting off to the right foot. So, to Christina, before we let you go, I always like to ask, so where do people find you, contact you, get in touch?
Okay. And actually, we just moved into a new office, actually a few blocks away, which is nice.
Fantastic.
Have parking, very nice parking, which is good. We have a website, mag-cpas.com, because nobody can spell or pronounce my last name. So Mag, Monfalcone Garris. And then our number is 434-971-7255. We're there all the time, and pay attention to our emails and phone calls. And we also have that website that you can review some information. But I just want to be there as a resource.
Yep, absolutely. It's super simple. mag-cpas.com. So very easy to get to. And thank you so much for joining us this morning. I've learned a lot, and I think the audience really appreciates the insight and the experience.
Well, if you get any more questions, feel free to pass them on. I'll try to answer. Yeah.
We'll do. All right, have a wonderful day. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you. Thanks.
So as we go ahead and we do our swaparoo here, I know that was fantastic.
Yes.
Really learned a lot and appreciate some great questions. I mean, Xavier was coming up with Neil Williamson had a great question. Thanks for that question, because I know a lot of people really need to think about that before you start a small business.
Yeah, that's what was really interesting, because obviously you look at, when you're going for taxes, like you sort of think about everything after you open up a business, but it's interesting the importance of actually kind of even going before you even open up your business, even when you're still in the planning stage, you go talk to a CPA or a tax accountant and you figure out what's best for your business. And the other thing that Christina mentioned too, that we've seen firsthand, is the problem of people not saving.
Yep.
And I mean, it's like for us, like we're still very young, so it's like quite not an extreme problem of saving, but I mean, you start seeing people come in like a 40s and the 50s, and it's like, okay, what do I need to do to start saving retirement? It's like, you should have already been doing this.
Exactly. And as Xavier mentioned, not to get fooled by the notion that a change in the tax law is going to save you. Because even Secure Act 2.0, right? Yes, are there going to be starting 2023, end of 2020, starting December 31st this year, December 31st, 2024, there are going to be some changes that allow you to put a little bit more in after age 50, after age 60.
Exactly.
But these are minimal. In other words, $3,000 extra at age 60 is not going to add. We've run so many financial plans. It's not going to add that
especially
much.
When you're looking to be like, well, I want to retire at 65.
Exactly. If you're retiring at 65 to 70 and you get to put an extra $3,000 at age 60, that's the impact on your retirement plan is not even a year.
Exactly,
it's going to make hardly any impact. You put over the course of the first 10 years of working.
If you put $3,000 in when you were 25, it would be far more valuable.
It would be probably at least a year.
Exactly.
In your because you're talking about 40 years of compound growth. We've seen this when we run those numbers. So the best thing you can do is to start earlier and figure out. Take that into consideration when you're looking for a job, when you're working with an employer, saying, hey, is it worth it for me to stay in a steadier thing for 2-3 years if it means that I'm now vested, I'm fully vested in my retirement benefits? Because there are still some places, even with defined contributions, even with a 401k, et cetera, there are times when you're not fully vested until you've worked there for a certain time. In other words, you don't get 100% retirement benefits. You don't get the complete match of the free money from your employer.
Yeah.
So you got to take that into consideration, because yes, it may be great salary-wise to jump around. But if you get $10,000 extra salary, but you forewent $5,000 that could have been in your 401k, that other one might actually be worth more, because that's $10,000 taxable dollars.
Yeah, that's
versus
true.
$5,000 a year that could go into a tax-free brokerage
And let's be
account.
honest, most people too, whenever they get extra cash, the first thing they don't think is, I'll save.
Save
the
it.
first thing they think is, I'm going to spend.
Yep. And then, you know, of course, it's harder to do in times of inflation, right? But if anything, that's when you kind of even need more return, because the options are there for bonds, and anything that's not saved and invested is just being devalued. So it's a teaching thing to think about. And of course, you know, once you do invest, the question always, of course, is like, well, okay, how do I do this? I know you've done an interesting blog piece recently.
Well, so I was doing
a
a little research. So obviously, 2022 was a bad year. I mean, the market was down. The S&P 500 was down like close to 20%, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
No,
so
so
it was
basically around 18 point something percent down was the S&P 500.
Yeah, exactly, for 2022, right? But what I thought was interesting was that when I went to go look at like the top, I would say like top 6 or 7 stocks in the S&P 500.
In other words, the biggest names.
Exactly, the biggest names relative to what the S&P 500 index was. Tesla was down almost 70%, right? And Tesla's, I'm not sure if it's the biggest one, but it's one of the biggest, right? Tesla was down almost 70%. Now, like, there could have been other factors that contributed to that, right? But then you went to Google, it was down 37%. That's pretty big, right? Microsoft was down 27%. Amazon was down 49%.
Exactly,
That's pretty drastic. You know, especially considering that Amazon, you wouldn't think it, because how much people just continue to spend, and everyone's like, I mean, who doesn't see every day? You see like the Amazon trucks all over the place.
Exactly.
So you would think that there's no way that they would actually be down. They must have had a great year, but they were still down 49%. NVIDIA, which I think is
a top chip maker,
chip maker, down 48%, and then Meta was down 60%.
You know, formerly known as Facebook, in
Exactly.
case anyone missed that one. But exactly, which is really interesting, because I think and kind of points out a danger. Because when you told me this information, I was sitting there saying, those are all the big names that if you just get like a Robinhood app, and you don't know what you're doing, the little suggest, hey, why don't you invest $5 in Meta? Why don't you invest $20 in Microsoft? Why don't you invest $50 in...
And then you always read all these stories on the internet about how this guy got rich because I invested in Google, or I invested in Amazon. So of course, what people going to do? They're going to go in and say, oh, let me invest a little in Amazon, Google. Look, I'm diversifying my portfolio. That's not diversifying.
No, yeah.
That's not diversifying.
The 4 or 5 biggest names isn't actually diversification.
I mean, and you're talking about if you invested in those guys, I mean, your portfolio would be down what? Probably like 40%.
Yeah, your portfolios would be down 30% when the market as a whole, the top 500 was only down 18.
Yeah.
So you're sitting there in a worse position than if you had just bought an S&P 500 index fund and said, okay, I really have no knowledge about what's a good stock. Just buy me the top 500 stocks in the entire country. And you're better off than if you had said, oh, let me go
Tesla,
Google, Amazon, all these, geniuses, billionaires, they must know what they're doing.
The only one who is actually neutral for the year?
No, which one?
Berkshire Hathaway. Buffett. So maybe the old adage of people is like, I just do whatever Warren Buffett does. Maybe I guess it does work. I don't know.
At least sometimes. At least some of the time.
Yeah.
But that's interesting that, that's the only one that was flat. Because I think that also has a lot of real estate in there, which is an interesting...
that shut up last year.
Which was an interesting prospect. But I think it just speaks to what diversification actually is. Because sometimes the danger is you just get an app, right? You say, okay, I'm ready to start investing. I get an app. And decide, well, okay, I'll diversify by picking the top 10, names that are most familiar to me.
Well, exactly, because also they're like the biggest ones, and you're like, well, they're the biggest ones, so they
can't.
How down can they actually go? Well, they can go down pretty bad, because obviously they were worse than the stock market. I mean, the S&P 500 was. Yeah.
Oh, exactly. And the interesting, some of them are actually, because those are big companies. So Amazon, first being down, what did you say, minus 40?
It was like 49%.
Minus down, so down 50%. The Russell 2000 index, which is the 2,000 smallest stocks, so your small, super risky stocks, that thing was down 30. So you're sitting there saying, a very big company was actually down more than the super high risky 2,000 smallest stocks in the country. But the difference is that's 2,000 diversified. And that's one company that you're riding or dying by. So it just speaks to the importance of when you talk about diversification, actually taking the time to sit down and say, what does that mean? And it's not just 10 big names, but sometimes those big names may be down worse than the market because it's not actual diversification. 10 stocks is not really diversifying. You've got to really look at different asset classes in the market, and there were ways to, even beyond, I mean, we've done some research this year, looking at last year, even beyond just the S&P 500, right? If you were 100% in the S&P 500, you were down 18, right? But if you diversified some S&P 500, if you were smart, you had a financial advisor that said, yeah, let's do some floating rate bonds like we did earlier in the year in Emergent Financial Services. If you put in some high income bonds, there are certain portfolios that if you've managed the risk correctly, you could be looking at minus 14, minus 30. So
that's a big difference too, because your portfolio can rebound quickly if you're only down 12 to 14% a year. That's a quick. But if you were down 35 to, let's say, 40%. I mean, that's a long time before
especially if you
portfolio
needed those
rebound.
funds. Especially if you need to pull out funds, and again, the issue with some of these companies, and granted, we've talked about how Amazon has been down 90% before and then come back.
Oh yeah,
right?
It's not saying that these companies aren't. They could have a huge.
But the issue with companies, there's no guarantee.
Yeah, but the problem is, let's be honest, when you go down that much, it's also a lot harder to come back up. Remember, your portfolio can go down a lot faster than it goes up.
The old adage, the market goes, even though your portfolio and the market, they go up like an escalator and down like an elevator.
Exactly.
So it's important to consider. And again, you're right, because the percentage needed to rebound is much higher. So if you think about it, if you have a portfolio, you start with, let's say you had $10,000 and it drops 50%. So now you're at $5,000. To get back to 10,000, you don't need a plus 50% return. You need plus 100%
exactly.
return. Because you're now,
if you go up plus 50%, now you're only up 7,500.
Exactly.
You still haven't gotten back what you originally started. Put in. So it's difficult once you go down, and that's the problem. If you don't diversify your portfolio, you're like, just do the biggest ones. You be going there. It's like it might take, if the market's good, it could take 2, 3, maybe even 4 years before you recoup your losses. And that's not even counted. Like you get. That's not even talking about like getting actual money. Like you're just recouping.
What you put in.
Yeah.
Exactly, and also it's so much harder. They see it with behavioral economics. It's very hard for people to also know when to stay the course and when to cut your losses. So sometimes you sit there, right, and you have a stock that's plummeting, right? Do I sell when I'm down 10%? Do I wait till this thing hits rock bottom? Because if you sold Amazon when it was down 90% in 2000, you're sitting there kicking yourself saying, why did I sell that thing, right? But on the other hand, if you held on to a small biotech that went bankrupt, you'd sit there and say,
to be fair, once you've held down to something that's already done 90%, you might.
No, in other words, there are some stocks where it's down 10. Do I cut my losses
that's
now?
True, yeah.
And it's the challenge with individual stocks because you're not diversified. In other words, an individual stock can ride all the way down to zero. You could inadvertently ride that thing all the way to bankruptcy. Can you ride the S&P 500, the top 500 companies in the United States, all the way down to bankruptcy?
No.
The top 500 companies in the United States, owning a tiny piece of all of them. Yeah, 1 or 2 in there.
Yeah.
You may have some losses in there, right? But if you own all 500 because you're in an index fund, the top 500, the entire stock market doesn't go bankrupt, right? It may go down 18% in a year, but it's not going to go bankrupt. And you don't have to then make that decision. Do I bail on this company? Do I write it down 95% because it might come back?
Exactly, yeah. If you wanted to do that, basically what you would do is maybe have 1% of your portfolio, this is my gamble.
This is my gamble portfolio.
Yeah, it's like I'm going to,
I would have taken this money to Atlantic City, and instead I will put it in a small portfolio. Put that.
Yeah, but your odds are better off in the stock market than Atlantic City.
Probably a little bit better.
Especially now, because if you never noticed, the old days, you used to at least have the slot machines where you pull the thing and you do it. Now it's like a button, so you see people going like this. And the button. I'm like, no.
Before you know it, you've lost
before
$10,000.
you know it. Yeah, at least the other way, it's like you had to do it. And hell, at least I could even say it was exercise, arm movement. This is just, but it was like terrible. Like I saw this video. I don't know if it was Vegas or Atlantic City, just like these older people just kind of like doing it, and they would press the button because now it loads so quickly because it's like a computer.
And before you know it, you've lost $1,000.
Yeah, exactly. Versus you put 20 or I don't know how much you would, but maybe like $1 or $10, and then you pull the thing. It's like,
do I really want to do that again?
Yeah, okay. Let me put another. Yeah, but at least then you're kind of it's more controlled, and you're watching the thing spin. It's plus you probably felt like maybe it was less manipulated. I don't know.
Maybe
versus computers, that's like algorithm. It's like, okay, we'll make like the next one in every 1 billion person win. Exactly. So yeah, you're better off probably, having your little $1,000, but don't mistake it for retirement savings. Exactly. Yeah.
Great point from Xavier. He's been listening to the conversation, and he said, so we were talking earlier about if you saved $3,000 at age 20. Versus, as an example, at age 60.
Yeah.
He was saying $3,000 at 7% growth per year. Mm-hmm. So that's pretty, for those who aren't sure, that's kind of an average in the stock market over the past few decades, right? $3,000 growing at 7% for 30 years. So in other words, if you save at 30 instead of 60, that $3,000 grows to $22,000. So if you think about it,
that's probably in the financial capacity, that's easily maybe another 2-3 years you probably add.
Oh, absolutely.
Depending on what your expenses are.
And depending how much you've done that.
Exactly.
Right? Because you imagine the power of it, right? Mm-hmm. So that small piece of, the Secure Act 2.0 saying, don't worry, you can save an extra $3,000 at 60. If you save that $3,000 at age 30 and don't wait till 60, it's really worth 22.
Yeah. So
to really make an impact, that would have to be like 22,000. So imagine you can't just wait till 50, 60 and say, oh, don't worry, the government will let me put some more.
If you want to do that at 6 years old, how many years would you have to wait to do that then? I mean, you're talking about 7 years.
Basically, it would take
7 years. 7 times 3 is 21. So it's basically 7 years to
match. No, at 7% a year, it takes 30 years to get to 20,000, 22,000. So if you put the 3,000 at 60.
That's what I'm saying. If you put 3,000 every year from 60, it would take you to 67 to get that 22,000, which you already would have had at 60 if you just put 3,000 one time at 30 years old.
Yep, exactly. So it's just a huge, huge impact to save earlier rather than later. Yeah, so thanks for the research you do. For those who don't know, if you go to emergentfs.com, there is a blog section where you can read.
Well, it's not up yet, but
I know this will be upcoming. You've got a sneak preview, but you can see all of Michael's earlier blogs. There's some blog posts from Nicholas. So all of the research team, obviously a lot of what they do is how we make decisions at Emergent, but also we like to share some of those educational pieces with those who follow us. So you can see that at the emergentfs.com blog. So that's where you'll see a lot of Michael's insights.
Every once in a while, Nicholas too, but those you can skip over.
Every once in a while, Nicholas has a good idea.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, absolutely. So this has been fantastic. Just being with you here and talking with Christina. Learned a lot.
Learned a lot, yeah.
From her as well. Just a shout out, couple things upcoming. We talked about Castle Hill earlier. Michael and I went to Wassail. This past Sunday, and three other, I should say, big events upcoming, which you can see at castlehillcider.com. Barrel tasting is upcoming, so they'll take you in there and you can kind of see what the barrels look like, taste it direct from the barrels, what the cider is like.
That sounds interesting.
Upcoming a royalty. Rob talked about this a little bit that week. So the royalty is like it's like, I guess the highest level of tea in England. So it's the one where you have the cakes and the little things, and so they'll have some royalty with some cider, and then Valentine's Day. So the weekend before. So Valentine's Day is a Tuesday. Some of us it's kind of important. It's kind of required. But Valentine's Day is a Tuesday. The weekend before, they will have a chocolate pairing with Deer Hearts. Chocolate, along with some.
I've heard a lot of things. I've never actually tried a Gearhart's hot chocolate before. But everyone always says they're delicious.
You should. You should. We'll have to make that happen. So that's coming up at Castle Hill, and then of course our friends at the Gym CVille February 4th, Saturday, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., the Health and Wellness Expo will be there. Emergent Financial Services will be there. Today, Mañana will be there. But you can check it out. Different booths from different people in the community. They're focused on health and wellness, which, of course, is a huge part of what they do at the gym. Gene and Justin and all the team there. Yeah. So be sure to check that out. You can see it on their website. They're also at the Gym CVille on Facebook and Instagram. So you can check them out and see news there on the upcoming Health and Wellness Expo on February 4th.
So a lot of exciting events coming up.
I know. Your weekends should be busy.
Exactly. Even
though it's the winter. Exactly. Get out there and enjoy. It's been
We're telling people, go out, go spend some money, but also save.
Exactly. But it's that balance, right?
It is.
It's the balance of...
You don't want to be a Scrooge and hoard it all.
Exactly. One, it's balancing, right, to saving is future consumption. And spending is current consumption. So you want to make sure that you enjoy life now, but you save just enough
so you can enjoy life
can enjoy life later. And you don't have to be worrying and anxious in retirement. That's kind of what we focus on. So we're not, for those who come into Emergent and sit down with our consultations, right? Just the first one we never charge people, so they come in and we talked about they'll be able to attest that we are not Scrooges. We are not going to come in there and say no dining out. No fun, no vacations. You have to save. No, it's about balancing and saying, how can I enjoy some of what's going on now, while also making some provision for the future. It's not about being a Scrooge or being a spendthrift. It's about that balance in between. So be sure to check those things out. Next week, Janine Aquino from Aquino Barron Consulting going to be joining us.
Okay.
So that'll be fun. And then just a lot to look forward to. I mean, Nick has the guest list lined up, so there'll be some fantastic entrepreneurs going into the rest of going into the spring, I should say, and the rest of 2023.
Well, we're getting there this spring. I'm already the minute New Year's ends, I'm ready for winter to be over. Let's be honest. It's like, it's just a countdown to spring. It's like, okay, maybe a couple months left.
I'm ready. Well, the days are getting longer. It may be chilly today, but there is more light every single day. So we definitely encourage people to enjoy the day, get out, get some fresh air, and send us any entrepreneurs, people you want to feature on the show. Be sure to do that and check it out. And be sure to check out all our guests that we've had. You can always see them all at todaymañana.com. There's the whole episode list that you can check out. So we really appreciate all that you do. Really appreciate the I Love CVille Network on the set. And of course, our partners at Emergent Financial Services, Castle Hill Cider, Craddock Sirius Insurance, the Gym CVille, Forward Adelante, the premier Latino networking group here in Charlottesville, Virginia. And I always appreciate you, Michael.
No, I appreciate
coming
you,
on.
Alex,
Fantastic partner to be on the show with and co-host. Of course, shout out to Xavier. He had some great questions today. Xavier, Johnny Ordanellas, basically all our guests today were fantastic. Neil Williamson, great question. So thank you all so much for joining us, for your comments and questions. We'll look forward to seeing you all next week. But until that time, as we always like to say on the show, hasta mañana.